Yes, well, the thing which amazed me about the I Ching and caused me to become so deeply involved with it is this fact that it seems to work against all rational expectation.
Welcome to the Just Now It podcast. I am your headhunter, Michael Jagdeo. The reason I wanted to speak with Fernando Castro-Chavez was because he discovered the answer that eluded Joe Rogan's favorite podcaster, Terrence McKenna.
What we've done is simply to formalize the notion of the Tao, to make a deep study of the mathematics inherent in the structure of the sequence of the I Ching. See, most people are quite familiar with the fact that the I Ching is composed of hexagrams. Hexagrams have 6 lines. They may be broken, they may be unbroken. No one had ever explained how it was ordered.
You mean the order of hexagrams from 1 to 64?
That's correct. Why is the first one the hexagram with all solid lines? Why is the second one the hexagram with all broken lines?
So I got a better understanding of the genetic code by studying the I Ching preserved in China, having 6 possible sets of combinations, and each cell consisting of 3 plus 3 lines equals 6. That was in my basic representation like this. For example, 3 plus 3 makes one of the starting points. That in this case I represented it with proline. And in the other extreme is the broken lines, like full broken lines like this. And let me see, where is the other full broken line? Like right here. And in this case, the opposite extreme was the F, while the opposite extreme was the P. But this is just only one of the 6 possible representations, because the cube has 6 faces. And if you have the Descartes axis of x and y's, the Cartesian, because of the Cartesian axis of the y vertical and the x horizontal, you have the 3 main characteristics of the nucleotides with the possibility to be put in 6 different combinations or positions, which matches exactly the 6 faces of a cube. So I got a better understanding of all of this genetic code by the I Ching. Jagdeo is asking me how you discover the I Ching, and I may say that it just came naturally. I started exploring the circular representation of the genetic code, and then I jumped to a square, but not the ordinary square representation of Greek, that I find it really only useful for reference, but very dry and cold, like an address book, very non-exciting, not meaningful biologically. I found the circular representation of the genetic code exciting and meaningful, because every 90 degrees you have all the hydrophobic amino acids and all the other groups of amino acids that are compatible, and their numbers also are in balance in the spherical representation of the genetic code. So it's biologically meaningful, the circular representation of the genetic code is more meaningful in 2D, 2 dimensions. Circular representation of the genetic code is more meaningful than the square representation envisioned by Francis Crick. And that was the beginning, the circular for me. And from there I was invited to publish a quantum representation of a square representation of the genetic code, where the compatible codons could be able to exchange positions. That's the reason of the quantum name, because they can constantly be like vibrating, like alive, flipping positions, all the codons that belong to a same amino acid. This is a very beautiful mentality and way of thinking about the genetic code as something alive and also vibrating. and compatible. So it was easy to jump from the square representation to the I Ching and to discover that the original meaning of the I Ching was the most ancient binary, like in a computer binary system, to represent the 64 codons of the genetic code. Having the 64 codons a perfect complementary double helix, starting with the opposite diagonal extremes, meaning the upper left pairing with the lower right, and from there cell to cell, which means that I started analyzing the I Ching from left to right like this, and then I made a continuous like this, and then a continuous like this, and then a continuous like this. Sorry about the slowness, but I want to explain for you to have it clear. And when I made a mistake, I retrace my words, so like this, then like this, and then like this, you saw, as the first strand. So you can take the upper left side and stretch it as a strand, and the end of that strand is right here. And then you can do the same with the lower part, and you see that this part of the strand in the lower right extreme is a match to the upper left extreme. And so each one of the cells with each one of the complementary cells at the bottom. So the lower strand, if you go like this, one, ends here. So this cell is the end of the lower strand, and it's a 100% and perfect match. Check you that with this cell, which means that the broken lines, that means the zeros in the I Ching, are 100% complementary with the continuous lines, horizontal lines, rows, lines, that represent the 1. The continuous represent the 1, the discontinuous represent the 0. So the 1s and the 0s are a perfect match. For example, the first one is the 6 zeros, and it's a perfect match to the 6 1s that is in this extreme, and so on and so forth, cell by cell, as they encounter themselves. So this is so beautiful and so meaningful. Even structurally, you can have the formation of the double helix by looking at the representation of the I Ching and complementing one strand with the other. That's fascinating. And I strive, when I was studying in the EDX, the free Harvard class of programming, of C++, I took it and I was able to develop these designs, trying to represent more visually. That was the full purpose of my beginning into programming, to represent more visually in the easiest way as possible what I am speaking right now, that many times goes way beyond the understanding of my students, and I need to present to them something visual to tell them I'm talking about this. And sometimes I don't need to say anything, just to show the video, and they say, oh yes. So a video saves me minutes, hours of explanation. So until reaching the center in the opposite directions to integrate the double helix. And as I say, which were the center in the opposite directions, this one, that is the match to this one. So figure out yourself, but I have this video that you can see also by yourself of how this gets complementing each other, complementary. You will see it. And the same, I did another video with individual complementary codons for you to see what I am talking about, because all of this is original, all of this is new, and it came out of just praying to God and asking God, how can I represent in a beautiful, meaningful way for my students, my love for my students. The viewer in general is my student, the onlooker, the curious, all of them are my students, that when they see and they get captured by the beauty of this, they give the glory of God, who is the one that designed it, but I get the blessing of having been the one that did the discovery of this. These are the matches that I am explaining. You can see why they are completely complementary, all of these ones. So pairing them one by one in a perfect match. So the ancient didactics representing the DNA replication is done by the old gene, the continuous line right here. one in the I Ching binary, pairing to the new yang, the broken line. So this broken line is pairing with this continuous line. So the old yin is pairing with the new yang. And the new yin, which is the broken lines going to the right, is pairing with the old yang, that is the continuous line going to the left. So the yin and the yang is the one that made me complement as a pairing of amino acid sequence, of nucleotide sequences of DNA when it's being replicated sequences. So the old DNA sequences, when they split, are the old yin and the old yang. And the new strands are the new yang and the new yin. And this forms a perfect different strand from the other, that is this one, that can now split and from one cell divide themselves and transform into two cells. So I want you to read all my articles. They give all the details, and to pray about it, to understand what I am saying, because I know that this was ancient knowledge that is all about DNA, that when the new Chinese that arrived to those lands found the representations of the I Ching and all of these arrows, they quite didn't understood what they meant, that were all science from the times before of the flood of Noah, as far as I understand. And I will try to explain later why I understand these things like that, based on the basic text for the 5th Industrial Revolution, which is the Bible. I'm going to explain why I see this in this way. But you can see that the I Ching is so simple, 100% simple compared with the actual writing of the actual contemporary Chinese, that is the most complex and hard to learn language in the universe, in the world, because it's not letter by letter but syllable by syllable, and that makes it very, very, very complex and not practical. But you need to memorize a lot of things to be able to write in Chinese. So the language is totally 100% different in its complexity to the simplicity seen in the I Ching. And in this representation of the DNA replication, as is posed until this day by the yin and the yang. And then the new yin again a 0 pairing to the old yang again a 1, making a 1001. And how the cells can be also represented by groups of the codons, that then you can erase the cell division to make them to form the compatible groups of codons, the full squares that make and produce the same amino acid. And the same with this other representation. When I was talking about my software, it can be even represented by codons, by triplets of nucleotides, those are the codons, or by the actual letters of the amino acids. That seems simpler and cleaner, but you lose the detail of exactly which is the compatible codon. So you may lose some details of the frequency of which codon that is compatible, producing the same amino acid, is most used according to the organisms. But both of them are used according to the need of the researcher. Even the most ancient representations of the reputed inventors of the I Ching, Fu Shi and Nua, indicate that it is related to the genetic code and DNA. These are the most ancient representations, and that's just the double helix, which comes out of the I Ching representation of the strands that get twisted. So all of that was the ancient knowledge, even before of this age of the prehistory, as we call the times of the flood. Antediluvian was an old accurate word to represent that. that was also carried on for the documents that were discovered, maybe carved in stone or somehow. Also, the alternative names of the I Ching are all biologically meaningful, biologically related to genes, as it is also called the Book of Changes, that's biology, that's the variation for the adaptation, or the Book of Mutations, that's the variation for diseases. You have here the both names for the I Ching, the changes that produce a good adaptation and the mutations that produce a bad disease, being both names to call the I Ching from the past genetic terminologies, biological terminologies. And that's not enough in the ancient world. Also, you find in the ancient world the 20 amino acids represented by the Mayan. The Mayan numbers were vigesimal, including the 0, also evocative of amino acids. And this is the way for me to represent in another article that I published. India, Troy, South America, all of them indicate that the swastika was a symbol of fertility and of life. Here we are not even paying attention to the use of the swastika for eugenics, as Hitler in the German darkest hours was used. But also the eugenics of the swastika of Hitler had a biological meaning. The Aryans, as he used to call them. But in the past, that was not a racist, superior race terminology, but just a meaning of the biology of life. Because when I represent the symmetries of the genetic code, I was very surprised that I found a rotational meaning and pattern that produced unexpectedly. I did not plan to find this as swastika. So the meaning of fertility related with genetics, as it's found in the most ancient drawings or dolls made by the ancients, not only in South America, but all over the ancient world. You can see that is put in the belly as representation precisely of the baby that is being formed. You can see the amazing things of the swastika through the years and through the past, and was a biological meaning, but in a cheerful way of life, mostly put in the bellies of women. And this was another swastika for a very old Indian stamp, also celebrating life. So I found the swastika when reordering the perfection of the genetic code. And I put all the explanations of why I did it and the logic of how I did it, all coming with the logic of... Were you always good at math? It's one of the questions, Mike Jagdeo. And I will say, mathematics is and always has been a very hard topic for me, both to learn and to teach. However, by using multiple real examples for each equation and of the geometries represented by the equations or involved, I have been able to have a better understanding. For example, here I just showed the precious balance of what I was talking before, the circular representation of the genetic code, that it comes with a perfect complementary balance in the opposite positions. And in one of my articles I give the explanation of why is that so, and why is that also meaningful biologically. So your hydrophobic amino acids that fall every 90 degrees in this circular representation can be exchanged, and the proteins are still functional, even if some are bigger in size or with different colors inside your body, and ones work faster than others, like the alcohol enzymes from the Caucasians are better working in degrading methanol than the same enzymes from the Asians. and that is because adaptation to what is the normal use and most frequent use. So the first breakthrough was my first research published in the United States of America. A team worked on the microarrays of 5 mice tissues on anti-obesity at the BCM, Baylor College of Medicine, that I explained. And when I made sense using as many softwares I was able to find at that time in 2001, 2002, 2003, 15,000 fragments of genes represented in the Affymetrix microarrays were starting to make sense. And I found, for example, the genes for the fat degradation upregulated and the genes of the fat buildup downregulated. For example, here I show some of the changes of the perilipin knockout mice that are all the genes that degrade fats that are swimming, flying, running, floating on the blood stream because they don't have a place to be stored. All the organism activates the genes to get rid of that fat. So we have the Krebs cycle, the beta oxidation, and the electron transport chain, also known as the respiratory chain, activated, which means that the mice that are lean, in order to burn fat, they breathe faster than us. They need to put more oxygen inside themselves to get rid of the fat. And they breathe more than twice also than the normal mice because they need to get rid of that fat. And they do it through beta oxidation, respiratory chain, Krebs cycle. Fascinating, fascinating. So that's one of the proposals also of control of weight. Do some sort of exercise that makes you increase your breath rate to put more oxygen in your body so you can burn more fat. Isn't that fascinating? So simple, so beautiful, so straightforward. My first personal research published in the Journal of Theoretical Biology, the best and most reputable journal of theoretical biology, was an analysis of the patterns of the circular genetic code representation, such as hydrophobic amino acids every 90 degrees, and all of them have in the center the uracil. So this is one of the logic aspects that I found, but I found other 2 logic aspects that I call them the rules of variation, of the compatible variation. Because before of my time, everybody was just finding harmful mutations to describe hereditary diseases. And I started to change the pattern of mind. So if you want to be outstanding, even if you are not immediately recognized, like Mendel, he was recognized after his death. The same Van Gogh, the same the Bizet, the composer of like Carmen. If you want to leave something enduring above and beyond your money or your fame, you do something that you really love. And people is going to value it even if it takes time.